Hey again, you've caught me in a narrow pocket of Paris where the air tastes like a workshop's breath and the street outside pretends to be gentler than it is. Picture Rue Bleu in the 1860s. Haussmann's boulevards muscling through old neighbourhoods, plaster dust on collars, shopfront glass newly proud. Behind one such polite window sits a wallpaper shop with more ambition than daylight, and tonight you're stepping through its back door. I'll keep this quick. You're about to learn how beauty gets manufactured sheet by sheet, block by block, breath by stolen breath. The contradiction is simple. The richer the colour, the poorer the lungs that make it. We'll stay close to the floorboards and tell the truth as it smells. Vinegar, glue, and something metallic you can't name yet. This isn't a lullaby. It's a tour with splinters. If you're new here, welcome to a channel that doesn't blink at grime. If you enjoy this kind of misery, subscribe. And comment with the colour of your walls, unless they're green, especially if they're green. Welcome to Rue Bleu, or at least the part that pretends elegance out front and sweats in the rear. The showroom sits on the street. Vases, velvet-bound sample books, a clerk who speaks with sighs, and then there's us, the working rooms behind. Cramped, lime-washed, sticky in the floorboards, with vats that burp and rollers that never stop whispering. It's your first shift. Late by their clocks, early by your nerves. The foreman, scarf knotted against a draft that doesn't exist, points you to a bench where ledger lines were carved by years of elbows. He says your name like it's an assignment and taps the bell with two knuckles. You set down your coat and the coat takes a breath you didn't know it could, soaking up glue fug and vinegar. The back wall is a confusion of drying racks like bakery trays for ghosts. Above them a loft sags under paper that drinks the room's damp. A stove ticks, your boots lift with a tacky kiss. You tie on an apron that used to be someone else's problem, find a pencil behind your ear you don't remember placing, and wait for the first order you will misunderstand. Industrial Paris looks like progress when you squint from a new boulevard, and like debt when you stand inside it. Haussmann has widened the city's veins, and money circulates where carriages can glide, but patterns and paint do the real convincing. Bourgeois taste has discovered that walls can brag, and wallpaper is cheaper than frescoes and quicker than a painter with opinions. So every week a couple in better shoes comes hunting vines, parrots, Moorish arches, floral sprays, whatever makes their dining room and their dinner guests bow to the host without noticing. Elegance is a story told by repetition. One sheet, then another, then a room that insists it was always expensive. You stand in the engine room of that story, where the ink is warm and the paper sweats, and you start to understand that taste is a machine like any other, fed by hands you don't meet at parties. There is a street joke that Parisians live for facades. In here the plural has a smell. Copper, vinegar, chalk, glue. The city will call what you make fashion. Your chest will call it something else. You took this job because the pay was a few sous better than sweeping leaves from a rich man's courtyard, and because your landlord only respects coins, not character. No one mentioned why the last apprentice left, and when you asked the clerk, she blinked like dust had jumped at her and turned the page. The foreman said his mother needed him, which is the kind of truth you tell when the real one would cost production. In the corner, a girl with sleeves rolled to the elbow pressed her lips together, as though holding a nail between them, and kept printing. A mop leaned against the wall like it had been promoted from water to witness. A rumour threads between benches that the boy before you stopped lifting his right arm and started forgetting small, important words. Another says he fell in love and left to sell umbrellas under a wider piece of sky. Both could be true. In Paris, romance often shares a suitcase with escape. The girl coughs into fabric the colour of a meadow after rain, and looks at you like the new broom might not last a week. You decide not to promise otherwise. You notice it by ear before you see it. Everyone's cough rhymes. A dry scrape in, a wet note out, and a pause like a man is testing whether his own lungs are still under warranty. The green isn't just on aprons, it lives under fingernails, lines cuffs, clings to the hairline like a jealous lover. Someone wipes a wrist with a rag and leaves a parakeet smear. Someone else sneezes and studies the handkerchief, brow puckering at the emerald freckles. The foreman says it is only the glue, as though glue could play the flute inside your chest. The floor is dusted like a pastry, only the sugar is wrong. When a shaft of winter light climbs in from a high, grimed window, the air itself auditions to be cloth, fibres of green twirling in drafts made by movement. A boy at the pace table dips and spreads with priestly solemnity and has 2 teeth blackened to stubs. You consider breathing less. You settle for pretending the air is not chewable. It sticks to you anyway. We'll get to the work in a minute. The lining up of sheets, the blocks, the treadle that thumps like a footstep in an upstairs room. But this part, the selecting of silence, matters. You keep your questions in your throat because your throat already has company. A bell rings that isn't quite a bell, more a piece of iron trained to obey, and bodies move towards stations the way habits do, without ceremony. The showroom door opens, and the voices out front are velvet and coin. The door closes and the sound in back is cloth, dragging over wood and breath counting to itself. The foreman lifts a wooden block the size of a paving stone and lets you feel its weight. You will learn the rhythm, he says. Line up, press down, release, re-ink, repeat. Good work as a metronome with skin. He smiles without showing teeth and sets the block back among vines and parrots, ovals and lattices. Above, pigeons quarrel in the rafters like landlords. Morning finds you already flavoured by the room, tongue tasting yesterday's glue like a cheap coin. The foreman decides your education begins in the pigment corner, where sacks sit like sullen guests, and a scale waits to argue with everyone. He unties a canvas mouth and shows you the reason customers keep pointing to the sample page, with the bright leaf. Schweinfurt green, Paris green if you're feeling patriotic, copper acetoarsenite if you want the word that refuses a poem. The colour looks cheerful the way a knife can shine, crystalline specks that pour like sand with ideas. You think powder should float. This one clings, static in its bones, finding knuckles, cuffs, the rim of your nostrils as if it has a map. He sets a sieve over a basin and tells you to make the weather fine. You shake. The world snows green. Each tap frees a puff that lifts, turns, and remembers gravity at the speed of regret. It is the first lesson the shop gives. Beauty arrives as dust and takes a tithe from breath before it agrees to become pattern. You keep shaking because there is no other verb available. The recipe is a catechism you recite without faith. So many grams of green to so many ladles of boiled glue. A whisper of chalk to tame the shine, a shrug of vinegar to make it behave. The glue pot breathes like a sleeping animal, skin gathering, bubbles sighing, and you stir with a paddle whose handle remembers everyone who left early. When the powder meets the steam, the air blossoms, not a flower but the rumour of one, and your face learns there are stings that do not admit witnesses. A rash sketches itself where a fleck found a damp wrinkle of wrist. You wipe the wipe, then accept the stain. The basin's rim grows slick with colour that wants to live everywhere except inside the mixture, and you herd it with the kind of patience that pretends to be skill. Someone on the far bench coughs a length of time that could be a prayer. Someone else laughs like paper tearing. You fold until the green stops being stars and starts being one sky, and the steam teaches your eyes to water without permission. No mask, no gloves, no apology, only the ritual of weighing, sifting, coaxing the dry into the wet, like you're baking a cake for a guest who never leaves. You tamp lumps against the pan's lip, persuading them to surrender, and the paddle prints green thumbprints into your palm where the handle chews. Already the colour owns the half-moons under your nails. It has filed a deed and moved in. It slides into your cuffs like an invitation. It nests at the corners of your eyes where grit loves a home, and when you blink it smears an eyelid story you did not write. The foreman says to strain it one more time because grain makes streaks, and streaks send sheets back like insults. You lift the sieve and the powder performs again, fine as lies, eager as fog. When you exhale, the mirror of the basin trembles an answering ripple, as though breath were a tool on the bench. You consider holding yours until the pot is lidded, then remember the day is longer than your bravery. You learn the shop by nose before you learn it by names. Chalk dust announces the cutting table like a shy cousin. Boiled glue is a thick-backed book you can't close. Copper is a coin rubbed between damp fingers. Vinegar is yesterday's argument made polite. Sweat is the part they never advertise, the sour of work that turns to salt on your lip when you lick it by mistake. And you will, because your tongue has not learned shame. The green rides all of it like a passenger who won't pay, lifting whenever heat says yes, settling whenever cloth begs. In the high light drifting from a window, the colour becomes a weather front. Motes, spirals, lazy snow nobody ordered. A cat prints paw petals over a stack of waste sheets and looks personally pleased. You stir, scrape the paddle against the rim, and listen to the room conduct its orchestra of small labours, an ensemble without solos where breathing is percussion. Somewhere a kettle ticks toward boil, somewhere a brush drops hair into a pot and is forgiven, and somewhere a man hums a hymn he doesn't believe in, because the tune keeps his hand steady. Observation is free if you can afford the eyes. The green girl's fingers tremble in a rhythm the block press will pretend not to notice. The old man's missing teeth make his grin into a picket fence that lost the war. The boy at the pace table leans like a man whose bones are negotiating with gravity. Nobody wears a ring. Metal would argue with the work, and the work always wins. Everyone keeps a rag folded on the bench, and the rags hold a season of stains, from pond water pale to parrot bright. When a cough starts, 3 others answer, call and response sung in the key of habit. Someone mutters that the English are blaming wallpaper for little coffins, and someone else says the English blame everything except the English. You keep stirring, and the basin finally offers you a surface that doesn't resent reflection, a green so even you can almost forget the price. The foreman watches you not with kindness but with inventory, counting your steadiness the way he counts sheets. It's not poison if you don't breathe, or touch, or blink. By noon your shoulders have opinions and your wrists have learned a new alphabet. The mixture has turned from mutiny to consent, a smooth body that coats the brush with a promise of even tone. You ladle it into a lidded pot and carry it toward the press, like a priest with something sacred and badly behaved. On the way you pass the racks that mimic a bakery. Only the loaves are paper, and the steam is a rumour that sings to your lungs. Above, the drying loft whispers its weather into the room, and you count the steps between your station and the treadle, as if distance could be safety. The foreman nods you toward the bench where patterns live face down and blocks sleep in neat stacks, their carved bellies ink-stained, their handles polished by generations of yes. He will teach you the rhythm next. Line up the sheet, kiss it with the block, lift before the glue remembers, re-ink, repeat. But first he tells you to sit and drink water that tastes like the inside of the room, because even miracles need breath to continue. Training means standing so the block can find your weight. The foreman fits your right hand to the handle and your left to the edge of the sheet so the knuckles make a fence, then shows you the first doctrine. Line the watermark to the penciled tick, plant your feet, lower the carved belly, press, lift before the glue remembers its first love. Re-ink from the shallow tray that looks like it resents the brush. Touch the registration pins with a tenderness you rarely give your own face. Do not correct by faith, correct by line. The treadle's thump should live in your heel, not your shoulder. Let the block kiss, not smother. If it chatters, your wrist is lying. If it slides, your breath was late. He demonstrates twice, then steps back and folds his arms so time can watch you. Your first print leans left like a man who lost an argument. The second sits shy of the vine. The third finds the pins and decides to stay. You discover that the press has a temperament and it isn't yours. Accuracy here is muscle politely talking to wood. The bench is a geography of tools pretending to be obvious. Carved wooden blocks sleep face down on felt, each belly whittled by a dead man's patience into mirrors of leaves, birds, Moorish arches, flowers that repeat until they turn into law. Sticky inking rollers squat in a tray lined with cloth, their skins tacky with yesterday's resolve. A stack of frisket papers sits to one side, windows cut to keep the uninked places honest, while a brush with a haircut too short to flatter dabs along edges that want to drown. Registration pins bite through this paper's margin, and a timpan of stretched muslin gives a forgiving bed. The foot treadle waits like a dog that only obeys one sentence. Beyond the bench, drying racks climb the wall in tiers, each shelf spaced for a hand. A bucket of soapy water pretends it could erase a day. Beside it, a nail brush, a block of pumice, a stub of beeswax, and a ledger where numbers march like rosary beads. A chalk snap marks the table's lip for alignment. A strip of packing paper evens a press that favours east. It can't fix lungs, but it keeps the lies pretty. You print beside the green girl whose fingers tremble like a man reading a telegram he should not open, and she works twice as slow to make it come out right. Her cuffs bloom eucalyptus when she knocks her wrist against the tray, and she laughs once, the small laugh of a person who anticipates a scold and gets none. The old man with the missing teeth sets his block down like it was a friend he has to wake without frightening. He sings a soldier's song that forgot its ending and keeps the beat with his boot on the frame. A boy with a pacebrush drifts between stations, cleaning like a penitent, and the foreman ignores him so precisely it looks like love. Your print line begins to straighten the way a guilty man sits up when someone coughs nearby. You try to smile at your sheet. The block refuses to be charmed. Accuracy is the only romance allowed, and even that cheats if you blink when the pins nip. Her eyes water, then steady, and she nods to no one. By mid-afternoon, the room is a greenhouse with ambition. The glue pot swells its breath, the presses sweat into the air, and the drying loft exudes a wet heat that finds the inside of your shirt and puts down roots. Steam lifts from the racks in slow exhalations, and every exhale carries a little theatre of green, motes spinning, shooting, settling on lips and lids where salt keeps them longer. You notice that the air is heavy in a very specific place: the ladder mouth, the aisle under the racks, the corner where the pigeon feathers collect. You wipe your forehead and print a thumb of leaf across the skin, and the sting is a sting that has read books. The foreman calls for windows that do not open, then shrugs and tells everyone to drink. The green girl ties her hair back with a strip ripped from an old proof and says her tongue tastes like coins even when she's not thinking about dinner. Congratulations, you're a humidifier with complaints. By the ladder you can smell the green itself, a bitter penny rubbed on the tongue. The rhythm carries you until it owns you. You find the pins without looking, you feel when the block is lying and when the paper wants to slip, and you learn to rescue a sheet with a palm's heel pressed the way a mother smooths a cowlick. Your hands stain to the wrist despite the rag you keep folding back to a cleaner square, and the web between thumb and forefinger burns where glue and grit married in secret. The foreman approves with a silence that has fewer edges. When a streak appears, you recite the catechism. Breathe, wipe, re-ink, test on waste, try again, the pins nip, the roller sings, the block settles, and the pattern behaves as if it decided to all along. You begin to count in sheets, 10 to the rack, 20 to a sigh, 50 to a swallow, 100 to a private oath. Somewhere between counts, your shoulders adopt the posture of furniture. Your calf learns the treadle's distance the way a sailor learns a deck, and your back signs a small contract at the base where vertebrae keep their grudges. Evening peels the room back to its frame. The press is cool, from hot to warm to sullen. Glue skins over like a pudding nobody trusts, and the racks become a forest of damp colour sighing with tiny crackles as edges let go. You scrape green off the block's high points with the soft side of a chisel, coax bristles back into obedience, and lay the block face up for once, just to memorise the carve. A country of valleys and ridges that your palms have learned by touch but your eyes want as proof. Your lungs feel abraded, as if you spent the day licking copper wire, and every breath tastes of vinegar's thin temper. Outside, Roux Bleu pretends at bakery and beer. Inside your chest the recipe is different. You hang your apron, rub the line where the cord sawed your neck, and cough a cough that belongs to the shop more than to you. Everything smells like copper vinegar, and the city only smells better because it is farther. On the walk home you taste paste in the air between bakeries and gutters. A ghost of glue that followed. The bell that rings for politeness out front is not the bell that moves you, but you feel its echo through the bench, a tremor in the wood like someone tapping the inside of a table. The foreman smooths his hair with a hand already green and tells everyone to keep the line tidy. A client is coming, a real one. You wipe your palms on your apron until new smears look like old ones, then let the block sleep. The show works better when tools look dignified. Through the doorway the showroom glows with noon light on glass and gilt, and the owner rehearses a smile that knows prices by heart. He turns, fixes you with the stare that means obedience, and says quietly that you're not to speak. Not a word. Customers like the romance of craft, not the conversation of craftsmen. You step back, crack the green pot's lid so it can gleam like cordial, and nudge the drying shelf so it sighs like a violin. When the door opens, winter air follows silk and perfume, and money arrives attached to a husband and a woman who already looks like a pattern. They step past the sample books the way children step through puddles, careful but delighted by the mess they can make without consequences. The current rage in our quarter runs to vines that climb but never need pruning, parrots whose feathers won't molt into the soup. Moorish arches the size of a handspan repeating until a wall learns mathematics by heart, and floral sprays that make a winter room confess spring. The owner talks of light fastness and imported garments as exclusive the way a banker says safe, while the husband nods in a rhythm that sounds like account ledgers closing. She trails a glove over a book's lacquered page and hums, then pivots to the bright square pinned on the wall, the green that drinks light and gives it back. Her eyes widen as if the hue just told her a secret about her own parlour. Behind her shoulder you catch your reflection in the glass, a worker-shaped smudge framed by parrots that never molt and vines that never tangle. Under it all the room ticks, paste cooling, rack settling, your breath filing itself where it won't be seen. You have been told not to speak. You do not speak. But your hands cannot help telling the truth to themselves. The green on your cuffs tingles where steam kissed it. The skin under your nail sings a low iron song. The owner in the front room praises the richness of the hue, calling it lively without being vulgar, modern without insulting tradition, and he gestures toward the window where a bolt of the pattern glows like a bottle held to light. The lady touches the paper and withdraws her fingers as if the colour might leap back and live on her glove. She smiles anyway, a practiced victory. The husband asks about durability and smoke, and the owner replies that this shade laughs at soot, which is an exaggeration, but only by a cough. Your own throat itches at the compliment, as if the word lively had turned into dust mid-air. You keep your shoulders square and your eyes soft and breathe as shallow as dignity allows, and you realise that in this shop silence is part of the price, bundled like twine around the sample packet. Patterns have their politics, even when the client thinks she is only buying a season. Vines whisper wealth because leisure climbs. Parrots promise conversation that never turns dangerous. Arches borrow grandeur without the trouble of prayer. Sprays erase soot and winter alike. The people out front purchase mood and status in a room that says their time is well tended. The people in back sell wrists, breath, and a night of sleep that will misbehave. In the gap between rooms, you can hear two translations of the same word, taste. One meaning money arranged into a story, the other meaning colour arranged into a shift's survival. The owner keeps his voice like velvet. The foreman keeps the bench like an altar. When a draft slips through, the green on a nearby rag lifts, twirls, and decides to sit again, as if modesty were a particle. The lady laughs at something small. Someone behind you swallows in time with the sound. You think of the boulevard outside, wide and clean, and how none of its new stones know what this green costs when it is still a cloud. The motif parade continues while the owner talks like a pastry chef about layers, undercolour, and the way a shadow block can make a lily seem honest. He gestures with a hand that never touches paste, and his cuff stays white while the green girl's apron invents new species. You catch the old man tilting his head so he can hear the price, without appearing to, and his mouth shapes a number he will not spend on himself this month. He will spend it on coal. The gentleman asks whether the green will fade. He is told it will keep its promise better than a politician, provided the maid dusts gently and the room does not sweat too often. You watch the lady's smile fix, then flicker, then return stronger. She's already pictured the paper behind her guests' heads and the polite compliments it will chaperone. A whisper passes along our bench about which house this is for, and whether their cook burns garlic. Envy and mockery arrive in the same coat and hang it on the same peg. The order is taken, the samples wrapped with twine that knows it is part of the performance, and the owner bows them out with assurances of swift delivery and the discreet labour of artisans who know their place. The door shuts, the bell's bright light stops ringing, and the room exhales back into its real weather. Rags wipe the benches not because anything changed, but because it feels like something should. The old man names their carriage a gilded stove on wheels. The green girl says she bets the baby has a nurse. Someone else mutters that if a room is expensive enough, even the cough sounds cultured. You turn the block face down again, lift the pot's lid, and the green looks up like a dog that trusts cruelty as much as kindness. The foreman claps once and the rhythm resumes. Line up, press, lift, breathe. Outside, the wheels scratch away toward a safer address. Inside, steam finds your lip and salts it. You tuck the rag back into your belt and swallow, because the throat behaves when ordered for now. They leave smiling. You stay coughing. They send you up the ladder like a message you would rather not deliver. boots clacking on rungs that remember every slip. The loft spreads low and long, roof ribs close enough to kiss your scalp if you forget to stoop, and the heat is a person you don't like who insists on standing too near. Racks run in alleys, tier on tier of damp sheets exhaling impatient wet breaths. Each page looks innocent until you see the air over it thicken, a wavering mirage where steam lifts pigment into weather. There is a shallow lake of warmth under the rafters, and moving through it is like walking inside someone else's lungs. You test for dryness with the pads of your fingers and learn a new vocabulary. Tacky, half-set, ready, or the green comes off like a rumour. Downstairs the presses thump. Up here time is counted by the distance between drips. Arsenic like steam, you're told without being told, and today the light makes the motes visible enough to name. You try not to name them. Heatstroke is not a bolt, it is a slow domestic argument under your skin, and today it opens every window. The air pushes against you like wet wool, and your pulse climbs into your ears and refuses to come down. You try to make yourself narrow so the heat will miss, but it finds the hinges anyway. Your shirt threads glue to your spine, your scalp itches where salt accumulates into a story, your vision picks at its edges as if the world were a badly set print. You count the boards between racks and steady the tremor in your hands by inventing chores you do not need. Smoothing a corner that was already obedient, straightening a pin that was already true. Someone below coughs and the sound pokes through the floor like a stick through paper. You kneel beside a row that pretends to be a small forest and breathe shallowly until your chest rebels and does the bigger work on its own. When you stand, sweat rolls from your jaw and leaves a green smell you will now recognize in your sleep. Your job up here is choreography. Turn, space, lift to the higher rack where air seems thinner, leave gaps, then return to the first run and check for tack again. The turning board is scarred with 100 years of caution, and you use it to slide under edges so fingers don't print evidence. Paper sounds different by stage. Wet sheets kiss and let go, half-dry sheets sigh, finished sheets whisper like linen. The walkway between aisles is a narrow plank with opinions, and you keep your eyes on the knots because the knots keep their promises. Threads from the muslin timpan float here like pale weeds, catching on your lashes. You blink them away and discover the delicate sting that means the green has ridden the moisture and found your eye. A bucket of clothespins knocks your knee and persuades you to memorize the bruise. Across the ridge, sunlight stutters through a missing tile and writes an unhelpful ladder of brightness across a line of parrots. You step around it like a hole. You glance at the chalk tally on a beam, sheets to turn before dinner, and understand that numbers can sweat just as you do. There is a roof hatch near the north gable where Mercy pretends to live. On breaks, you slide the bolt, shove it with a shoulder that immediately regrets the movement, and climb into a sky that remembers winter. The first gulp doesn't taste like salvation. It tastes like soot, horse, bakery smoke, and the faint electrical bite of telegraph wire singing overhead. But all of it is not green, and that is almost a blessing. Pigeons sit in a jury along the ridge tiles, necks shimmering private rainbows while they discuss bread theft and roofs. Chimneys square up like soldiers. Down on Rue Bleue, a cart argues with a puddle and loses. You press your cheek to the cold lead flashing, feel heat leave you like a coin from a pocket, and permit yourself exactly 30 breaths before the foreman's clock in your head rings. A baker's boy whistles something rude and tuneful in the alley, and the sound reaches you like a rope you choose not to grab. When you drop back through the hatch, the attic swallows you like a mouth that has decided to keep its food. Inside again, your nose resumes its delicate accounting. When you blow it into a rag, politely behind a stack, there are green freckles you did not ask for, constellations no observatory will admire. The foreman calls this proof of industry and tells you not to show customers your science. You turn the sheets, touch the corners, weigh the air with the back of your wrist, and try not to lick salt from your lip. The green girl ladders up with a bucket of clothespins and the kind of smile that holds until it doesn't. She points at your rag and mouths stars, coughs into her sleeve, then taps her nose as if secrecy were the only gift we can afford. Steam from the lower racks brushes your knees and your throat. When you bend to fetch a fallen pin, the world tilts and rights itself. You steady your hand and pretend you meant to admire the lilies. Heat rebounds from the roof and sits on your shoulders like a wet dog that loves you too much. The green rides each exhale as if practicing escape. You swallow the tickle instead of clearing it and notice your hands have kept working without you. By the last turn, the day has become an argument you can't win but must answer. The racks have surrendered half their load to the lower floor. The air is still a soup with a mineral bite. Your legs have that small, glassy shake that says the ladder is going to be a negotiation. You call down, mind the corners, and hear your own voice come back thin. The foreman glances up, not unkindly, merely measuring whether the work will make its numbers, and waves you to water you have to persuade your stomach to tolerate. You pat your pockets by habit and find only the warm limp of a rag. When you wipe your face, the cloth leaves a shadow you'll carry home and into a basin, and the basin will keep it after you go. We don't need perfume, we wear death. You climb down one rung at a time, as if each were a small favour you must repay. Noon arrives without ceremony, just a slowness at the wrist and a wobble in the foreman's voice when he says break. You follow the bodies into the little yard that thinks it is a garden, because 2 cracked pots hold something once green and now theoretical. The air hasn't decided to be clean, but at least it doesn't carry steam. You sit on an upended crate with your back to a wall learned damp in a previous century, and take inventory. A heel of bread with the personality of brick, a wedge of soft cheese that sweats in the cold, and a bottle of wine too sweet to trust but cheap to refuse. The cork is missing. A rag does the job glasses would have done in a better life. Teeth worry the bread open, your jaw negotiates with the crust until the treaty holds. Someone passes a pinch of salt in a twist of paper, the twist returns greener. You lift the bottle, wince at its honesty, and feel sugar settle on your tongue like sawdust that changed its shirt. For 10 minutes the city outside quiets to hooves and a cart's complaint, and the yard smells of cold stone instead of glue. Conversation begins in the register of rumour, because rumour is cheaper than medicine. Someone speaks of the girl from the Rue de Faubourg, who fainted mid-press last week and woke up speaking to her own hands like strangers. Someone else mutters about a cousin in Calais who bought a nursery paper with little green hairs, and now keeps the window open in January because the baby wheezes. The old man ties his napkin around his neck like a bishop of Staines and declares that people die of winter, not of rheums, and we are fools to blame paint. He saw a mason cough black for 30 years and live. He saw a seamstress cough nothing and die. Cheese passes like a sacrament on the tips of knives. The wine makes a thin red moon on the rim of a bottle, and a wasp, drunk on last summer's luck, investigates and decides we are not its kind. When someone laughs, 3 others laugh quietly afterward, not because the joke is good, but because it feels like keeping balance on a moving floor. You take your bread in thin negotiations, sawing the crust against your teeth until the jaw remembers how to argue, then smear cheese across it in a layer that promises mercy and delivers texture. The boy with the pastebrush carries a sausage he insists is a miracle of connections, an uncle, a cousin, a butcher fond of poetry, and slices it with a knife that has printed more proof sheets than meat. He offers 2 coins worth to the circle. You bite something that tastes like pepper and fatigue. Napkins come out of pockets like flags of surrender, and return with green freckles no one votes to examine. A woman dabs her lip, studies the smear, and says it's the bad air off the canal again. Someone agrees because it is easier to agree than to rename your lungs. Coughs travel around the circle like a hat, one after another, each adding a flourish. Wet, dry, scraped, swallowed, until there is nothing left to offer but a shrug and a sip. By the wall a cat curls into the shape of punctuation and pretends not to listen. The old man holds up his shaking hand as if to catch the sun on it, lets the tremor sign its name, and says he's growing immune. See, the green can't find what won't hold still. The line earns him 3 smiles and 1 cough that turns into another and ends as a small apologetic swallow. He shows you where his nails used to be wider, and where the cuticles peeled like shy fruit last winter, and he taps the place on his wrist that stings in rain. The green girl says she rubbed goose fat into her hands each night for a week and woke slick but unchanged. She tried lemon, vinegar and onion, and learned only that onion tells the truth about everything. A boy offers charcoal scraped from the stove door as a purifier. An older woman suggests sleep, and everyone looks at her as if she has proposed a holiday in Egypt. When the old man laughs, his fingers twitch in time. The small parade he pretends is cheer. "If it were poison," he says, "I wouldn't be here to be handsome." And the smile he gives you asks you to help him believe it. They talk about wages the way people talk about weather, as fact, as complaint, as proof they are correctly alive. A woman from the cutting bench measures with her thumb and says her rent is 4 sheets a day and coal is 3, so the arithmetic means she must eat patience. You keep quiet because sums are a language you can do and do not want to hear. The conversation tips to the girl who collapsed, to the man who left because his teeth ached in time with the treadle, to the boy who went home early one night and never came back because the stairs looked longer than the morning. A silence opens. The old man steps into it and says that he has known printers, dyers, matchgirls and gilders, and the only ones who retired were those who changed trades in time. He points his knife at the yard door like a compass and says we are all apprentices, even the masters, because the work keeps teaching and the body keeps refusing to learn. Everyone nods as if he has complimented them, and someone laughs once, though it sounds like a cough with manners. You finish the heel, lick cheese from a thumb stained a shade a painter might call verdigris, and stand because sitting is a luxury that turns quickly to sleep. The yard resets itself, wrappers folded into pockets for later use, bottles set back on their sides as if they might refill by grace, rags wrung and slung over a line where winter will make an example of them. Someone shares a clove. You suck at its heat and realise your mouth has tasted so much sour and sweet that spice feels like a story you had forgotten. The bell inside barks once. People rise as if pulled by cords. The old man wipes his knife clean on a piece of wasteproof and says he once saw a foreman retire for 3 days before his hands asked to be busy again and brought him back. You look around the yard, at the green in the creases of knuckles, at the wrists rubbed raw where aprons sat, and understand the cruel arithmetic. No one here retires. They simply stop showing up, and the bench keeps their place warm. Break is over, appetite goes back to work before you do. The warning comes the day before, not from a posted notice, but from the owner smoothing his lapels and saying the word presentation as if it had claws. You're handed a bucket, a brush missing half its bristles, and a list of sins the shop would like to confess to water. Racks are wiped until the cloths give up green tears, paste tables are scraped to a respectable dull, windows are persuaded to admit light instead of biography. Even the cat gets brushed, leaving a small cloud of parrot dust spinning above its offended ears. A nail is hammered where none is needed so it can gleam for authority. The foreman chalks safety on a slate and underlines it twice like a prayer, then stations a clean bucket by every bench where yesterday there was none. You boil the glue a little sweeter so the room wears a better perfume. The green girl unrolls a new rag and hides the old one in the stove. Someone scrubs the ladder until it looks moral. We stage clean the air by opening a window to the alley for exactly 6 breaths, then shutting it again before truth wanders in. He arrives exactly late, the way men do who want to be noticed for their schedule. The inspector's coat has ideas about grooming and his gloves are the colour of bureaucracy. The owner greets him with sugar and franc notes folded like small obedient letters. A portfolio appears on the counter, full of certificates with stamps that look like medals from a timid war. The inspector nods at the loft without glancing up, listens to the foreman recite the catechism of precautions and studies a bucket as if it might compose a sonnet. His pen ticks the paper like a watch. When he tours the benches, he admires from a distance so respectful it becomes geography. The window we cleaned earlier obliges by admitting a square of honest light, and the racks behave like choir boys who learn silence. He smiles at a bar of soap laid out like a rare fossil. You learn the art of keeping your breath polite. He asks how many men are employed, and the owner answers with a number that forgets the women, the temporary boys, and the lungs that will not last the winter. A ledger appears as if it could answer moral questions, and figures march in 2 neat columns towards an agreement. The inspector tests the floor with the toe of his boot and decides it is safe because it is obedient. You practice breathing through your teeth so the steam will choose a different mouth. His smile shows no gums, only authority. It flicks on and off like gaslight. He does not remove his hat. He does not ask any name. When he nods, the owner grows taller by an inch you cannot print. You learn another rule. Inspection is a kind of theatre that prefers velvet to truth. England has been busy blaming wallpaper for funerals, the owner says lightly, and the inspector sighs in French, which is to say he makes denial sound elegant. He quotes a newspaper calling panic a British export and says that in proper houses, rooms are ventilated by good manners. You catch the green girl's jaw set as the inspector admires the colour that keeps customers faithful. He calls it modern, healthful to the eye, and very Parisian. Someone behind you coughs the word arsenic into a rag, and the syllables drown without rescue. The owner mentions that our pigments are continental and therefore civilised. The inspector agrees, noting that England likes to invent dangers so it can sell solutions. You keep your face arranged like wallpaper itself, repeating calm, decorative, while the air writes its own rebuttal under your ribs. You would ask about babies, but the conversation has no door for you. He mentions trades worse than ours, as if comparison were a poultice, and lists tanners, match girls, and gilders like saints in a litany of corrosion. The green girl keeps working because hands are the only argument we are allowed. You try to imagine a room where a person in a glove would touch the thing he praises, and the picture dissolves like paste in too much water. Down the street a trambell clangs its little sermon. Up here the sermon is a ledger and a nod. The inspector draws a breath through his nose, tastes glue and copper, and calls it industry. Your tongue tastes the same and calls it a bill. The show continues in small acts. The inspector asks to see the sample books and turns the pages with his thumb and forefinger pinched high on the corner, a gesture that touches paper without touching colour. He approves the placement of a water bucket beside the press and declines to ask if anyone fills it. He admires the ladder's new warning and does not climb it. He observes the cat with a seriousness that would flatter a minister. When he finally stops at your bench, he praises the evenness of your run and the cleanliness of your apron, then steps back as if proximity carried taxes. His glove traces the air above the green like a dowser seeking water, and finds only performance. He writes satisfactory with a flourish, trained to look like science, and the nib scratches the page like a small broom sweeping facts aside. He inquires about ventilation and congratulates the window for existing, then forgets to open it. A new sign says "Do not touch face" in letters that still smell of fresh paint, and he gives it the solemn glance of a man blessing a cradle. He observes the mop bucket, which is proud to be noticed, and fails to meet the eyes of any worker. When the owner offers him a handkerchief to dust his sleeve, he declines because his sleeve has never met dust. You feel your lungs take a deeper breath simply to spite the ritual and then regret it. He leaves a gentle crease in the ledger where his pen rested. It looks like a shallow grave for criticism. He requests a demonstration, and the foreman obliges. Block to ink, ink to paper, paper to rack, the ballet of repetition that makes buyers believe in eternity. You do your part. Align, press, lift, breathe, and the inspector applauds once with his fingertips, a sound like moth wings. He compliments the perfume of the shop. The owner laughs and says that is the glue, which is vegetable and practically a tonic. The inspector nods as if he has survived on tonics. He remarks that the city values industry that exports beauty, and the foreman says, eyes lowered, that we export beauty and keep the sickness. Everyone pretends they didn't hear the line. The inspector's pen is busy being deaf. A coin changes hands with the discretion of rain. He asks whether the green is imported. The owner says proudly that it is Parisian, improved upon by clever men with bottles and heat. The inspector says Paris has always turned danger into elegance, and everyone hears the compliment and none of the warning. You hold the block a heartbeat longer than necessary, as if wait could be a reply. The cat chooses that moment to sneeze and paints the inspector's shoe with a galaxy too small for his report. He pretends not to notice and steps back precisely the length of a glove. The foreman's mouth makes the shape of a prayer and then settles for a count. When he leaves, the room holds its breath for a beat and then exhales into its native weather. Rags return to their honest colours, the water bucket becomes a mirror again, the spectacles go back to being a joke with arms. Someone mutters that the English panic because their coal is worse. Someone else says the English panic because their children die indoors with pretty walls. The foreman counts the day's output as if numbers could build a mask. You look down and notice a perfect oval of clean wood where the inspector's glove hovered and never landed. The green girl coughs into her sleeve and leaves a constellation. You stand a little straighter because nothing changed and somehow everything did. When work resumes, the pins bite, the roller hums, and the air goes on doing its quiet arithmetic in your chest. The door clicks, the money rustles, and the showroom glass reflects only itself again. Someone begins a joke about spectacles and safety. Someone else ends it by coughing. You wash your hands at a bucket that was born to pose, and the water brightens for a moment, then quits, leaving your nails tinted like oxidized coin. Outside, the tramsoman repeats. Inside, the block waits for your yes. The inspector's absence weighs less than his glove. Works, as always, is the only argument that passes inspection. It doesn't look like anything at first. Just a light tap to the sieve, a shrug of powder, and then a hiss that isn't steam when the green finds the nick between your thumb and forefinger. The cut is yesterday's paper slice. No longer worth thinking about, damp from work and therefore welcoming. A pinch of Paris green leaps like it was trained to target water, settles in the slit and dissolves so quickly your skin can't invent a defence. Pain arrives with paperwork. A dozen sewing needles dipped in vinegar and hammered by a tiny, cheerful clerk. Your hand yanks back. The block bumps, the roller sulks. The foreman's head comes up like a dog that heard a math error. You breathe the way you do when the doctor presses a probe, politely, through your teeth, as if a smaller door would slow the hurt. The colour climbs the edges of the wound like ivy, bright and rude against the paler skin, and the sting keeps deepening until it feels less like surface and more like a sentence. You wipe. The rag turns spring. The cut keeps singing. A woman from the cutting bench watches your face blank into the mask everyone wears at some point and gives the gesture they all give, a small, practiced tilt that means both pity and carry on. "Don't bother rinsing," she says, tearing twine with her teeth while she ties a parcel. "It's already in your blood." She doesn't mean the rag, she means you. Copper and arsenic are quick courtiers when they find a wet door, and this shop is a ballroom of damp doors with your body invited. You get as far as the bucket anyway, because hope is stubborn, and the first splash teaches you that water only convinces what already wants to leave. The pain shifts shape, sharp to sour to sharp again, a lesson in confidence you didn't ask to learn. You make a poor bandage from a corner of waste sheet and knot it with glue-sticky fingers. The knot remembers to fail. The green girl glances up once, checks that your colour is still your colour, and returns to her block. "Keep it moving," she says without looking. "If you stop, it thinks." Work keeps its rhythm when bodies don't. So you keep yours. The press wants whole names, and you sign with letters that shake along the cut's edge. A line, lower, kiss, lift. Each verb arriving through a shallow, measured breath while the wound writes commentary you try not to read. Steam rises from the racks and turns pigment into weather again, the kind that drifts and decides. Some of it lands on your tongue, and taste becomes a drawer of spoons, metallic, coin-bright, persistent. The room's heat meets the cut's heat, and the two introduce themselves like old friends. Your wrist blushes a complicated map. You consider asking for spirits as a disinfectant, and remember, spirits are a disinfectant for money, not for this. The old man hums a bar from a soldier's tune, and your pulse hums the same bar back in your palm. You tell yourself it's a sting that will settle, the way glue skins and then agrees to be stirred. Your body does not sign that agreement. The pins nip on time. The roller finally forgives your wobble. Your mouth keeps tasting metal like a moral. Break comes, and the yard receives you like a stone trough catches a spill, without comment exactly shaped for it. You open the cut for sunlight as if the sky could diagnose, then pour a ribbon of wine along the line and learn a new octave of sting. Everyone hisses a little, the choir of people who have rehearsed this song, and then attention returns to bread because bread is easier to fix. The old man asks to see. He lifts your wrist to the light, his tremor a fast metronome against your pulse, and pronounces the verdict without ceremony. Already in. He taps the place where the vein runs like a string in a cheap violin, and advises lard tonight, lemon tomorrow, and prayer whenever the clock goes wrong. Someone contributes onion as a poultice. Someone else recommends sleep and gets laughter coughed back. You flex to prove ownership. The wound raises a small, convincing objection. A fly admires the new colour and wanders off. The yard wall keeps its damp. You tie the rag tighter and learn that knots can provoke. Back at the bench, you change your habits the way birds change angle mid-flight. Your left hand becomes librarian gentle, guiding paper without grip. Your right learns to lower the block from the shoulder instead of the wrist, an economy that would impress a mathematician if mathematicians used glue. The cut throbs when the treadle rises, eases when it falls, and you ride that wave like a compromise. The supervisor pauses, looks directly at the rag tied through the web of your hand, and performs the shrug you have seen given to rashes, blisters, and men. Happens to everyone. He means welcome to the list. He calls for faster drying, for wider spacing, for the ceiling hatch to stay shut against the wind. He does not call for you to sit. Your tongue keeps its coin, your breath keeps its arithmetic. Your eyes perform their own watering service and pretend it is the steam. By late afternoon, the cut has taken up residence, a tenant with a loud clock, and your hand has adjusted from protest to politics. You can work, it can hurt. Both can be true. Night gives you your room and takes appetite in exchange. You wash at a basin that turns the water into a pale memory of the shop. The rag bleeds a little colour and then decides to keep the rest. Your landlady greets your hello with silence shaped like mercy, and leaves bread by the door as if feeding a shy animal. When you lie down, the mattress lists toward the wall, and you let it, ships choosing a lee. Sleep arrives without the ceremony you think it deserves, and brings a dream in which the air is a slow snowfall of green that refuses the floor. The flakes are letters you can almost read until they touch your eyelids and blur into a meadow that climbs the walls. The pattern is beautiful and endless, and you are, impossibly, proud of it, even as it grows over your blanket and into your mouth. You wake just before it reaches your tongue and taste metal anyway. The wrist throbs once like a punctuation mark and then quiets. You listen to the building breathe, to your hand answer, and to the colour that has moved in. You dream in green that night. You notice her failing the way you notice winter arriving, in small recalibrations of comfort that turn into rule. 2 weeks ago, she started missing the first beat of the treadle and catching it on the second. A week ago, she sat on the stool between runs as if the wood had learned her name. Yesterday, her hair gathered in the teeth of her comb and refused to come back, and she laughed at the surprise like a person who mistakes a crack for a joke. Today, her face has the pale gloss of a candle left too long near a window, and when she smiles, it is the smile she keeps for customers who cannot see past the pattern. She lines her sheet, lowers the block, and then pauses mid-press as if a thought had slipped its leash and she must chase it. Her apron hangs lighter on the cord. When she coughs, the room edits its own breathing in a brief reflexive politeness. You pretend to count sheets, but you're counting seconds between swallows. Outside, Rue Bleu turns the wheel of ordinary noise. Inside, the colour keeps its promises and refuses its debts. Her cough was once the kind you could mistake for dust. Now it comes with a sound like paper tearing and leaves a bitterness hanging that has nothing to do with paste. She leans over a pail the way sailors lean over rails, but nothing arrives except a faint string and a stronger colour. The foreman pretends to discover an errand so he can stand near without officially hovering. The green girl flattens a crease with unnecessary care so the gesture will count as dignity. The old man hums, stops, hums again, then remembers the words are no use and folds them back into his mouth. When she wipes her lip, the napkin comes away freckled, meadow bright. She laughs once in apology, saying it's the canal air, always the canal air. Her hands shake when she lifts the pot. Your own hands reach without asking and take it for her. And for a moment, the bench forgets its politics and behaves like a family that knows better than to argue with the floor. Sunlight from the high window paints her cheek in pewter. Within it, her skin shines with a damp that does not belong to heat. The collapse arrives without theatre. One moment, her hand searches for the registration pins by memory. The next, her knees are thoughtful and then absent. She sits the way people sit when they fall, surprised to find the floor so near. Someone lowers the block to the felt before it can campaign for your toes. Someone else moves the pot so her elbow won't know heat. She folds forward like a paper bird returning to a flat sheet and retches into the pail, the sound too private for the room, and the room too honest to pretend it is not listening. The foreman opens the alley door to let a strip of cold behave like help. A bottle of vinegar passes under her nose. Her eyes water, but the world does not return. The bell is not rung. Work pauses as if a sentence forgot its verb. The cart is a door taken off its hinges and given wheels. 2 boys fetch it from the yard and pretend it is a privilege. You and the green girl lift from knee and hip, set her down among folded rags, and tuck her scarf under her head with stained, careful fingers. No hospital enters this story. She goes to a neighbour's attic 2 streets over, where the slope of the roof collects heat in summer and argument in winter. A woman who knows broth and laundry tends her with a confidence that modern men call ignorance when it doesn't fit in a bottle. Rest is prescribed because it is free. The shop sends a small purse that looks larger when it leaves and smaller when it arrives. A priest comes by and finds nothing to say about wallpaper, except that the lilies are handsome. The window is cracked because someone heard a doctor say air is medicine. A bucket sits discreetly by the bed. The sister's children step like spies. She sleeps and wakes and sleeps, and the cough writes its own hours. The attic smells of onions, starch and old rain. A black line of soot on the rafters remembers last winter. Laudanum exists somewhere for christenings and toothaches, not for people who cost less than a pattern book. So there is a basin, a candle that doesn't ask questions, and an aunt measuring sleep with her breath. Back in the shop, her prints still hang on the racks, beautiful and fatal in the same breath. Vines that promise leisure dry beside parrots that have never seen a jungle, and the green she managed so evenly looks as if it were designed by health. The foreman runs a finger along the edge of her last sheet and leaves no mark. He is careful about what the room can stand. No one speaks a eulogy. Rags are wrung, trays refilled, the bell with the manners rings twice, and the day goes on with the stubbornness that belongs to factories and grief. The space she occupied tightens like a belt 1 notch smaller. Someone moves the stool, then moves it back. Her apron hangs from a nail and remembers her shape better than we do aloud. Her handwriting remains on the tally slate. Neat numbers that knew how many sheets a life could make, until the cloth wipes them without asking. The glue pot at her station skins over and is not stirred, and the cat curls beneath her bench as if sorrow gave off heat. In the morning you inherit her station. The block comes to your hands as if it could teach them what they don't yet know. The apron fits, because aprons always do. The cough is lighter than the block and travels faster. You move the frisket to the left, the bucket to the right, and discover she arranged them that way for a reason your wrists will explain tonight. The old man nods and does not say her name. The green girl tightens your strap, taps your elbow into the narrow corridor where accuracy lives, and leaves her hand there a heartbeat longer than instruction requires. You take her chalk and find your palm underlining the second tally every 10 sheets because she did. By noon, your throat has its own new edge, and your cough arrives politely, the way visiting relatives do. Her block fits your palm so well you wonder whether wood can learn loyalty. Your wrist gives the small roll she used at the end of a press without permission. Her block, her apron, her cough. The only promotion the shop guarantees. You start seeing it in places that never signed a contract with the shop. The bookstall's cheap romances wear green like a promise. Advertisements for cough lozenges insist on emerald borders. A grocer stacks pears under a paper canopy the colour of envy and calls it freshness. Even the absinthe posters seem to wink that the city prefers its poisons fashionable. On washed mornings, the river's skin remembers algae, and you watch a plank-yard man brush bright preservative on a skiff until the wood pretends to be young again. Tram tickets carry little vines, matchboxes flirt with parrots, cigar bands parade ivy. The tint is everywhere and nowhere, a decision collectively made by people who would swear they choose beige. You feel ownership and nausea in the same breath. In a pastry shop, a sugared leaf glows the exact shade you whisked this morning, and you almost laugh because the baker has found a way to frost the day's cough. The boulevard seems proud of its polish, but the colour winks from scrolled iron, from catalogues, from the lining of respectable hat boxes. You are hired to print patterns, now the city repeats you back to yourself. Shop windows preach taste with little sermons pinned at eye height. Lozenges of patterned paper behind porcelain, cigar bands printed in meadow, confectioners wrapping mint creams in wrappers the precise fashionable bite of leaf. A draper knots ribbons in a cascade that teaches a passerby to want. A perfumer tucks violet-scented sample cards into a book that opens like a fan. You carry deliveries through this catechism and become a ghost reflected in gilt, a worker smudge passing under chandeliers that believe in their own light. A seamstress props a door and shakes out a bolt until the street inhales dye. A jeweller lifts a tray and the velvet inside glows mossy. Outside, a chemist, a broadside blaming miasma for winter coughs is framed, helpfully, by a cheerful garland. You are background in their theatre, they are foreground in yours. A trolley bell scolds, a boy hawks papers, and you keep walking because standing still invites questions none of these windows want to answer. Nobody turns their head toward the cough behind the glass. Today, the foreman sends you to measure a dining room and a nursery in a house whose stairs believe they are better than people. A maid leads you like contraband through corridors that smell of beeswax and boiled bones, and a nurse regards you with the defensive pride of someone whose charge is perfect. The nursery blooms. The cradle's canopy is pale green with stitched leaves. The sample book lies open to vines light enough to feel like air. The window sash is the colour of a bottle held to the sun. Toys guard the hearth, a wooden horse, a drum, a puppet with painted eyes. You stretch the tape, mark the cornice with a pencil that leaves an obedient bruise, count repeats per yard and write figures that will return as invoices with nicer handwriting. The nurse hums, the maid holds the ladder and whispers that the master likes green because it looks clean against coal smoke. A stove ticks, breathing little iron sighs. The child stirs and settles like a bird adjusting its wing, and you hold your breath. You want to say everything. That some colours bring company, that steam teaches powders to fly, that your rag tells the truth in freckles, that your friend is sleeping under a roof that leaks sorrow, that you taste metal after work and it is not an acquired taste. You want to ask the nurse whether the baby wheezes when the fire is damp and whether she ever wipes a shelf and finds a meadow where there should be dust. You want to tell the maid to air the room when the boy sleeps, and to keep a bowl of water near the stove, vinegar in it if she can. You want to whisper that beauty has a back room and you live there. You say nothing. The measuring tape clicks like small applause. Instead you discuss seams and joins, how to turn a corner without teaching the pattern to lie, how many rolls a nursery devours when hungry for fashion. You speak the safe nouns, paste, drying, delivery. The verbs you need, warn, spare, stop. Stay locked because opening them would cost the day's wage. The nurse thanks you for your care. You thank her for the light. Etiquette pockets the truth. Outside, the street continues pretending it is a mirror for the fortunate. You watch a cabman switch horses while keeping his seat's cushion from touching the mud, and the new mare snorts under a harness rubbed dark as chestnuts. A boy sells cones of roasted chestnuts the shade of penny you taste. His paper twists are cut from something printed in leaves. On a bakery window, the baker's daughter tapes an advertisement for petit fours framed by ivy, scrolls bright enough to pretend the room is breathing. You pass the printing of a theatre poster, whose chorus girls kick through painted laurel and hear laughter you didn't earn. A wind lifts, the paper flutters, and a green petal sticks to your lip. You stop, peel, walk. A glove-maker's apprentice blows into a form and powders it with talc that looks suspiciously like something you sift. At a bookshop window, a pamphlet on domestic ventilation dozes between two romances. Your lungs try to draw a long breath and draw, instead, a measured one, as if coached by an invisible tutor. You decide to count to 50 before you cough, and you make it to 47. Glass at twilight is honest. In a closed shop's window you catch your reflection. Apron grooved at the waist, sleeves ending just shy of the wristbone. Jaw set for a verdict. The eyes do not blink right away. They are rimmed red where steam writes small letters. They carry a brightness you do not remember leasing. Behind you, the display repeats vines and arches so politely it mocks. You hold still until the street's motion doubles you, and then the copy of you walks while the original keeps looking. When you finally move, the glass returns to merchandise and you to errands, but the eyes belong to someone who learned a language you didn't mean to study. You test a smile at the glass and it bends wrong. Thin at the corners, practical in the middle. You practice a face that would reassure a customer and discover you can still make it. You practice a face that would frighten and discover you never had one. Somewhere a violin scrapes a stairwell and lands on the note you've been carrying in your ribs all day. You pull your cap down and carry it home. Winter does not arrive in the shop as snow. It arrives as damp that chooses a chair and stays. The roof beads breath and lets it fall back into us. Racks bloom in tiny islands of green that are not our pigment at all, a soft mould that licks the wood where yesterday's sheets sweated. Iron prints its grievances in rust. flowered rosettes around nails and along the ladder's rungs. Gloves stiffen into attitudes that do not fit hands, so you choose skin and speed instead and call it skill. The stove ticks without winning, feeding a thread of heat that is swallowed by rafters and water. Your breath arrives in visible ghosts that join the steam and change their names. The loft becomes a lung above us, wet and patient. The floorboards sweat like animals. Wool remembers last week's cabbage and will not forgive soap. You learn to keep sleeves short, to warm the ink with a palm, to step wide around the slick place where drips collect. Outside, winter makes clean edges. Inside, it draws its thumb across the room and smears everything once. Gloves that were supposed to save you turn traitor at the first chill. The leather hardens into a memory of hands that are not yours, pinching at the knuckles and slipping at the palm until a block might as well be a fish. After an hour, you strip them and relearn the lesson the shop prefers. Flesh negotiates better than cowhide when the press expects tenderness at the pins. Powder drifts lazy in cold air, then collapses all at once, making freckles in the paste like rain on milk. Condensation gathers on rafters and chooses a sheet at random to anoint. Your scarf traps your own weather and breathes it back at you colder. Fingers ache in a bright joint-by-joint language. The treadle's iron climbs through your soul and into your calf. You warm the glue slower, skimming the skin with a patience that would flatter a monk. The window sweats a thin river that pools on the sill and teaches mildew to write its name. A brush left upright freezes into a little flag of bristle, so you lay them down like soldiers and line their heads with rags. Shifts stretch, not by decree, but by the arithmetic of cold. Sheets take longer to let go, blocks need more coaxing to behave, and every pause teaches the day how to steal minutes. The foreman adds a half hour to the bell without touching the clock. Everyone hears it anyway, and no one argues because coal costs, mouths wait, numbers matter. 2 workers stay home with throats that whistle. One returns thin as a ledger line and moves as if the air were broth. You find yourself marking time by the rate the paste skins, by how fast the stove clicks, by the way light crawls along a nail. The tally slate fogs over with breath and is wiped, then fogs again as if the shop wants to erase totals that refuse mercy. By dusk you have turned patience into a tool and call it efficiency, and the only thing that speeds up is the ache that climbs your back one rung at a time. The paper grows heavier the closer it gets to ready, a sly trick you fall for every hour. When the bell finally barks, you listen for a second one that never comes and keep working anyway. The damp invents new places to live. It threads your cuffs, takes lodging in the bend of your elbow, plants itself in the seam where apron cord meets neck. Your fingers prune as if they had been swimming, though the only sea here is paste and air. The cat finds a shelf and becomes a decorative object, fur crackling when you try to pet her. She elects to be ornamental until April. The old man's cough becomes a schedule that keeps everyone honest. The green girl ties a strip of flannel under her dress and calls it armour. Her breath writes commas on the glass. Paste turns stringy in the cold and must be persuaded with circles smaller than your patience. Vinegar sharpens its voice. The door swells and sticks. We wedge it with a scrap of ruined lilies and pretend the fix is clever. Winter does not break anything outright. It loosens every joint and asks you to work while they argue. Even the racks sigh when you pass, wood expanding like ribs that forgot how to rest. At some point the red appears in the handkerchief and you stage a small private theatre. You tell yourself it's a cut lip, a loose tooth, the dry air cracking something trivial. You fold the cloth so the evidence faces inward and put it back in your pocket like a secret that owes you rent. The next cough chooses its own timing, and you obey by looking at the ceiling as if architecture could explain anatomy. The taste in your mouth is iron filings stirred with vinegar. Your tongue performs a poor audit and finds the numbers unchanged. You drink water that tastes of paste and decide you're better. For an hour you are. Then the treadle lifts and the ache behind the breastbone lifts with it, and you work smaller so the day cannot notice. You stop smiling to yourself because it costs breath. You scrape your tongue against a crust of bread and call it medicine. You rinse your mouth with weak tea and call it courage. When the old man asks if you're well, you point at the window and blame the weather. He nods because lies are cheaper than doctors. Near closing, someone makes a joke that used to travel well, that if orders keep coming we should print death notices next, lilies on one side and particulars on the reverse. and the laugh lands on its stomach and stays there. The press is quiet by steps. Thump, hush, tick, a little groan as the treadle finally rests. You lift the blocks to the shelf with 2 hands because tonight they feel like verdicts. The glue pot skins over and you do not break it. Tomorrow can have that argument. The stove ticks like a cheap watch. Windows sweat a second time and the drops run little green trails through the dust at the sash. You count the day in stacks and find the number correct and your body wrong. Outside, winter has the decency to be clear. Inside, it lingers at ankle height. On the way out, you tell yourself the cough is weather. It does not answer. The foreman kills the lamp, and the last glow in the room is the enamel of the green itself. Still damp, still bright. Still pretending it owes no one anything. You decide to leave the shop the way men decide to quit tobacco, after a scare, with a pocket full of firm intentions and a body already bargaining for exceptions. The red in the handkerchief made the talk with yourself easy, and the talk with your rent impossible. But you choose breath over arithmetic and tell the foreman you will not be in tomorrow. He nods like a man who keeps farewells in a drawer, says rest, and does not offer advice because advice is more expensive than hours. You walk home lighter and heavier at once, counting the coins left in your pocket and the stairs you will not climb in the morning. Notices nailed near the bakery promise work that isn't glue. Porter wanted, bookbinder's assistant, deliveries for a chemist, a messenger who can run. You circle them like a horse testing ice. In your room you line the notices along the windowsill and practice breathing in 4s, as if a new rhythm could replace the old. The cough answers in 5s. You decide that tomorrow you'll present clean nails and a steady voice to someone who has never smelled your sleeves. The bindery lives above a courtyard where boys slap wet sheets onto lines and hang them like laundry. The master's door sits 2 flights up, which is a cruel little joke, and the banister is polished by hands stronger than yours. You begin in a walk and end in arithmetic. 6 steps, breath. 6 more, breath. The last run with your eyes fixed on the brass plate as if staring were a rope. On the landing your throat performs its theatre, and the cough signs a copper signature into your sleeve. An apprentice answers with paste on his palms, and a look that measures your lungs before it measures your character. The master peers past him, asks whether you can lift reams, carry ledgers, stand long. You can, until the room tilts, the walls step toward you like uncles, your knees decide to edit the interview. Someone offers a stool that convinces you to sit. You smile the way workers smile when the job is walking away and promise to return next week. He nods as men nod when a door has done its work. On the stairs down you count in 4s and touch the rail with both hands. Rest looks like obedience and feels like mutiny. You stay away from Rue Bleu for 8 days and work at getting clean as if soap paid wages. Lemon, vinegar, pumice, ash. The basin becomes a laboratory that outperforms the inspector's visit, and still the green holds the half-moons of your nails like keepsakes. You scrub cuffs until the fabric gives up and the colour does not. You carry crates 2 corners for a greengrocer, and discover exhaustion that has nothing to do with weight. Your breath behaves like a student who reads the lesson and fails the recitation. When you spit discreetly, a thread of meadow admires the handkerchief and refuses to apologise. The landlady says the air will mend you. The mirror says otherwise. You avoid the shop streets, and the city answers by sending the colour to meet you in wrappers, signs, ribbons. At night you lay your hands on the coverlet and wait for the green to fade, but the moons at your nails keep their little constellations. You begin to understand that cleanliness is not the opposite of poison. Sometimes it is only its studio lighting. Night sweats arrive like uninvited relatives and decide they own the bed. You wake damp and chilled, wrung but not hung, and the sheet smells faintly of vinegar, although the only pot in the room holds broth. Dreams go green again, a soft fall of powder through lamplight, letters written in dust that refuse to spell mercy. Your old bench repeating under your hands no matter what errand sleep promised. The neighbour presses onion syrup on you with the authority of a midwife. It burns kindly and does almost nothing, which is still better than nothing. You consider a doctor and then count your coins and decide to improve instead. You open the window a hand's breadth to invite winter inside and call it medicine. The cough waits until you're almost asleep and rattles the bed frame like a draft. When morning comes, the pillow is dry and you grade it a success. Then watch your hands tremble while you tie your shoes and give the day a different grade. You promise yourself shorter days, lighter errands, slower stairs, and the body answers with a small amused cough that sounds like a clerk turning a page. On the 9th day you risk roubleur and for 6 steps feel noble about it. Then you look inside. New faces bend to the bench with that beginner's hope that believes wrists can outvote habit. The green girl is still there, hair tied with a strip from a proof you recognise. She moves with the unsteady care of someone whose steadiness is rented. The old man nods to no one and lifts a splinter from a block with the reverence of a saint choosing a thorn. The inspector's new placard about not touching one's face hangs near the door, like a moral that forgot how to help. You want to knock and tell the boy nearest the sieve to hold his breath when the steam climbs. You want to fold the green girl's sleeves higher. You want to ask the old man to sit. Instead, you stand in the glass and practice being a customer-shaped absence while your lungs count to 30 for no reason but habit. A clerk notices your hat and decides you are only passing. You are, and you aren't. You walk on. You try the long breath you have been promising yourself, a test you think you deserve for leaving, and the inhale is a knife dipped in pennies. It burns high, then low, then settles into a bright line that persuades your shoulders to narrow. You let it out with a laugh because laughs are cheaper than fear and say, to the gutter and the winter and a sceptical cat, that you are fine. The word does not persuade your chest. You stop beneath a drain spout and let the cold argue with the heat you carry, and the argument ends in a tie that feels like defeat. A cart rolls by and its wheel hisses in slush. You use the sound as a metronome and try again, slower. The burn answers more politely this time, but it answers. You know then what your hands already knew in the basin. Some colours do not leave once they have named you. You turn toward home and walk at the pace of a man who has learned his limits. You test other doors because stubbornness is a tool you still own. The chemist shop on the corner needs a delivery boy who can carry parcels that clink and promise not to read labels. The counter smells like mint and camphor, and for a moment you believe in reinvention. The master asks if you can manage the hill to Saint Vincent without stopping. You say yes, because the mouth is brave when the ribs are not. He hands you a trial basket that knocks bottles together like teeth, and you set off determined to learn a new street by heart. By the time the slope shows you its steeper half, your breath has learned a smaller alphabet and your vision frames the world in corners. You rest the basket on a step that pretends not to be public and pretend to study an address you cannot see. A woman with a net bag full of leeks moves past and leaves a ribbon of clean cold. You borrow 2 inches of it and try again. The bottles arrive intact, your lungs do not. The master thanks you and hires the boy who came after, because employers prefer air that doesn't argue. You go down to the river because water forgives more than stone. The quays steam where barges moor, ropes sweating into winter, and men with backs like arguments pitch sacks from shoulder to barge with a rhythm that looks idiot simple until you borrow it and discover the arithmetic behind it. A foreman with a scarf tight enough to pass for character asks whether you can last till sundown. You answer that you have lasted longer. He hands you a sack that grins at your spine and you walk it 6 paces, knees whispering, and set it where he points. The second sack learns your name, the third teaches your hands to shake. The fourth opens your chest like a lawyer's letter. Your cough does not belong to docs, it does not care. The foreman's face holds that particular politeness that means maybe later or never, whichever arrives first. You watch river lights scratch the underside of a low cloud and count your steps back to the stairs, a person who has learned that the body's understanding of enough is not negotiable. The men do not laugh, they simply keep being strong in the direction of the barge. You stand in a church because the stone keeps cool promises. In the side aisle, a woman scrubs a step with a brush that has known better days. She hums a tune from somewhere that kept its people alive. You light a candle not because you've regained faith, but because you respect trades that endure, flame included. The green under your nails mirrors the saint's robe in the window, with an accuracy that feels impolite. A draught lays a cold hand across your neck. Your lungs approve and then recall their grievance. You think about confessions that have nothing to do with sin. Hours, rags, wrists, numbers, beauty that pays wages and coughs, patterns that learn to outlive their printers. When you kneel, the pew speaks its age in creaks that sound like admonition. You try a prayer shaped like thank you and another shaped like please. Neither changes the arithmetic. You sit back and let the candle be eloquent in your place. Somewhere in the nave, a child laughs once and is shushed gently, and the quiet that follows feels like a room agreeing to breathe on your behalf. It lasts 3 heartbeats. It helps anyway. You visit the attic where the woman from the shop is meant to be mending. The stairs gossip in old timber. A kettle lists toward boil. The air tastes of onion and penny and human patience. She sleeps or rests in a place that borrows sleep's posture, and the neighbour nods you toward a stool with a look that says you can watch but not disturb. Her cheeks have kept their pallor through a winter of broth. A rag rests in a bowl like a boat that lost the shore. You study the hairline where loss began, and the hands that still remember blocks even while they hold nothing heavier than comfort. When she stirs, her eyes open into the middle distance and then remember you. She smiles the small, exact smile of people who do not wish to frighten anyone with the news of being themselves. You say the shop sends regards, and she accepts them as if regards were a kind of soup. The neighbour offers you tea. You accept and learn again that gratitude feels like debt when you have brought only your hat. The cough that wakes her chooses its moment. You count 4 beats, then 5, then wash your cup and leave. A month of shortages teaches you that time can be measured in errands not taken. You learn the hour the rent collector prefers and make sure to be somewhere else. You grow very good at folding a handkerchief so the green lives inside. You carry small bundles of wood 2 streets for a seamstress who pays in thread, and even thread looks like coin on days when the purse is a rumour. The rag at your wrist is gone. The burn's edge remains, a little halo that has stopped arguing but refuses to forget. On the street, a poster promises positions for nimble fingers in a carding shed near Saint Denis. You take the address and throw it away 2 corners later, because you're not nimble anymore, not in the way foremen like. On the 3rd Sunday, you walk to the fort and watch the soldiers drill in a dust that seems merciful for being ordinary. You practice breathing in step with the sergeant's calls. The chest answers when it's ready. You clap once when they break ranks because bodies obeying in unison looks like health. A private hears your hands and offers you a glance that says he too has lungs. The nights get fewer hours long. Sleep visits like a postman, drops a bundle of heavy envelopes, and leaves you to open them without help. You learn to lie still and let the bed shape your back into something that can be argued with in the morning. You count neighbours' stairs, clocks, river horns, the cat that patrols the roof and announces the moon as if it were a thief. In these hours, the green is a memory that glows faintly, like plankton bumped by a passing oar. The cough is a little clerk working overtime, and the body, stubborn, insists that tomorrow still exists. You keep a cup by the bed for water because waking to swallow air without a witness feels like bad manners. On the 4th night you dream of the shop again, but this time the blocks are blank and the paper prints nothing and you stand there anyway, doing the motions because the motions are loyal. Morning comes without trumpets. The window holds a square of cheap blue and the city begins its racket of deliveries and news. You sit up and discover you are still made of arguments and luck. You put on your coat as if it were armour taught to be kind. The dispensary on the boulevards smells like a school for vinegar and carbolic. And the benches are an alphabet of trades that cough in different dialects. You take a number that looks smaller than the hours it will require and sit between a gilder with yellow eyebrows and a match girl whose jaw is bound in a kerchief like a secret you already know. A poster on the wall asks citizens to ventilate. The windows are painted shut by winter. When your turn stumbles forward, the doctor's hands are clean in a way that stings your pride quick as tally marks, cool at the wrist where your pulse hurries to be counted. He listens to your chest as if the ribs could gossip truth, then writes a recipe that spells rest, broth, air, and a cordial you can afford if you stop paying for coal. He asks your trade and looks briefly sorry when you answer. It is the particular pity of men who cannot print lungs. You nod as though advice were medicine. You leave with a bottle that pretends to be courage, and the knowledge that the cure weighs more than the glass. You try obedience for a week, because obedience is cheaper than another appointment. You walk where the wind moves, along the canal where laundry stiffens into flags, and barge smoke writes brief, legible sentences in the sky. You measure your breath against bridges, 3 beams across before the cough asks for title, 5 on luckier mornings. You hold an orange a long time before you eat it, because the skin smells like a country with fewer factories. When you finally tear it open, the spray stings your cracked knuckles, and you call that proof of life. You help a neighbour lift a trunk and discover that the body keeps a ledger of favours you thought it had forgotten. At night you heat a brick in the stove, wrap it, and invite it to sleep at your feet like a dog that remembers you were kind once. The cordial tastes like coin dissolved in sugar, and insists it is doing something. You permit the lie because it is polite. You do not step inside the shop street. The colour steps inside you anyway. There are days you believe you're mending because the mirror agrees for a single generous hour. You wash, scrape the half-moons until they bow, and hold your hands to the light like a parishioner testing faith. The green fades to a story you could deny in better company. You practice stares in halves, errands in thirds, sentences without stopping. You run into a former porter who claims he knows a foreman at the gasworks, and for the length of a cigarette the future smells like hot iron and wages that arrive even when it rains. The next morning the cough returns like a creditor who kept your address. It asks you to sit. You do. A day later you wake in a sweat so clean it could be water and believe again. The rhythm humiliates and educates by turns. You learn the backways between promises and capacity, and you begin to mark your calendar with symbols only you can read. A circle for a day with stairs, a dot for a day with rivers, a line through any day the cordial pretended to be a friend. News travels along Rue Bleue with the lazy certainty of cold, and one afternoon a boy from the shop finds you outside the bakery and passes it like bread you did not order. The woman from your bench has gone to her sister in St. Cloud because the city air argued too loudly. The old man turned his cough into a chair for a week, and then insisted he was fine because the rent asked him to be. Two new boys stand where you did and have not yet learned to blink when the steam climbs. He says the inspector sent a note praising improvements. He says the owner has learned a new phrase, best practices, and wears it like a scarf. You picture the placard by the door learning to read, the water bucket freshly heroic, the cat less impressed than everyone. You ask after the green girl and learn she still ties her hair with proof and still laughs in small coins. You buy the boy a roll and he eats half in gratitude and pockets the rest like wages. You breathe shallow while he talks because the bakery's heat lifts a green memory from your skin. You spend an afternoon in the reading room where the newspapers are chained to the table, democracy by leash, and study English reports of poison rooms and French letters calling the English hysterics with excellent typography. An editorial suggests that poor ventilation and poor people cause most deaths, and that pigment is innocent when properly introduced to ceilings higher than a worker's hope. A pamphlet claims to teach the bourgeois how to air a nursery without inviting drafts, as if drafts were housebreakable. You copy a paragraph that names copper acetoarsenite exactly, and tuck it in your coat like a talisman that will impress no one. A man across from you coughs into a handkerchief the colour of peas and folds it with the tenderness of laundry. He catches your eye and looks away as if acknowledgement could be contagious. You try to feel angry. The feeling arrives late and leaves early. On your way out, you pass a window dressed in parrots, the precise shade of argument, and you cannot help it. You admire the register, the perfection of a dovetail where the vine kisses the arch. Loving the work and fearing it live in the same room. You visit the shop again at dusk and stand where a customer might stand, practicing the face of someone who wants vines for a parlour, parrots for a gallery, arches for a hall that believes it is grander than it is. Through the glass you watch the green girl align, press, lift, with the fragile steadiness that has become her signature. You watch the old man set his block down with a gentleness reserved for small animals and saints. The foreman steps out, sees you, and for a breath his mouth softens into something that might someday remember your name kindly. He does not beckon. He does not shoo. He taps his own chest twice with 2 fingers, and then the bench with the same 2 fingers, as if blessing both the body and the work, and vanishes into the room you can no longer enter. You try the long breath again, and the evening answers with pennies before it agrees to give you air. You nod to the glass like a man leaving a church at closing. The pattern on display catches the last light and glows as if it had nothing to confess. You try being useful in smaller ways that won't test the ribs, mending a neighbour's shutter latch, copying a bill of sale for the grocer whose penmanship frightens customers, carrying letters 2 streets over, and pretending errands are a profession. There is dignity in accuracy, you tell yourself, and for 3 mornings the city agrees. Steps measured, breath counted, pockets honest. Dusk brings you past Rue Bleue because habit is a cart that still knows your route. In the glass you glimpse not your face, but your posture at 20 paces. The lean that once belonged to the treadle, the shoulder that kept the block square, the head tilted to hear whether the glue had started its skin. Inside, the foreman corrects a boy's elbows with 2 fingers and a kind of patience that passes for affection when it can't afford the word. The bell rings, polite as ever. You turn away, counting coins and seconds, learning a new arithmetic that makes change out of chores and pride. Steam you discover follows you even when you choose different doors. A laundry on the next street lets you try the mangle. Safe, they say, just turn and feed. But the room's white fog is a cousin of your loft. It finds the cut place in your old hand and reintroduces itself. Cloth breathes, powder remembers, your chest negotiates and loses. The forewoman, kind enough to save both of you the story, says you are deft but better in dry weather, which is the closest kindness can come to a refusal when it must still fold sheets. You sit on the curb and watch vapour freight itself out the coal vent like ghosts in uniform. Your breath joins the queue with its own small packet. Across the way a boy powders gloves on wooden hands, and for a moment the dust looks pale and innocent, until a shaft of sun teaches it a colour you already own. You keep washing your nails as if one more lemon would turn the moons into clean crescents, and the moons keep their property rights. A week without roux bleu is long enough for your shoulders to remember that they belong to a spine. 2 weeks are long enough for your nights to find new arguments. 3 weeks are not long enough to forget the room's grammar. Sleep gives you the old choreography. Lift, set, press, lift. Only there is no block anymore. Just the weight of a silence that has learned your bones. You wake heavy and cool as if a stone has been placed on your chest by a friend who promises it is medicine. Onion syrup lives by the bed like a small vengeful god. You worship when the clock says so and improve in the way a weather vane improves a storm. The city wears its green like jewellery. You wear yours where the hand meets the word. Some days are better by a margin you respect the way a clerk respects a precise column of sums. You walk the long way to the river, sit on a bollard, and let barges tell you how momentum can be slow and still be honest. A fishmonger laughs at your cough and then doesn't. He wraps your mackerel in an offcut printed in parrots, and you watch the oil bloom through the feathers until the birds look truer than they did dry. Children kick a hoop that rattles like lid and pot. A dog argues with a handcart and wins. The light finds tin roofs and sets them to singing. For 3 breaths you forget the taste in your mouth. Then the throat remembers its script, and the 4th breath is the one you pay for. You decide not to stand too quickly and call that wisdom, which it is, an age, which it isn't. Toward month's end you pass the shop late and the windows are already dark. In the narrow reflection you assemble the roll call you cannot say aloud. Her block, her apron, her cough. The old man's hymn with the lost ending. The green girl's proof ribbon, the inspector's glove hovering like a priest who blesses furniture. The buckets that pose, the ladder that remembers other feet, the bell that takes bribes from daylight. You list them not as a curse but as a census. You could knock. You do not. A lamplighter primes his pole with a practised wrist. The flame arrives the way skill always does, without wonder, without apology, exactly on time. You try a long breath under the new light, thinking new fire might bake the ache into something edible. The air answers in copper and heat and a clean bright thread of hurt that draws a line from throat to chest and taps the sternum like a polite creditor. You breathe in sharply. It burns. The next morning you choose a different street and the city puts green on it anyway. A hatter's ribbon, a confectioner's leaf, a nursery print pinned in a window with a card that says new for spring, each a small sermon on beauty's price. None addressed to you, all paid for by hands like yours. You take your time crossing, heel to toe, because haste feels like a confession and you're not ready to confess. The cordial in your pocket warms to your body and pretends to help. You let it. The landlady has set a basin under the sill to catch the night's condensation. The water bears a faint tint you pretend you cannot see. You take off your coat, hang it where the sun can speak to it, and sit on the edge of the bed until sitting becomes the day's first task finished. Outside, roux bleu practices being elegant. Inside, the breath you carry practices being true. Customers admire your work and they will never know your name. They will know a dinner that behaves, a parlour that flatters, a light that arrives at 4 o'clock and strikes the ivy just so, convincing everyone that money has a smell. They will sit with their backs to your hours and lean forward into compliments, forks paused, heads tilted, calling the shade fresh, spirited, alive, as if the wall had lungs and a better voice than yours. They will tap a fingernail against the paper and praise the register, never once wondering whose hand learned to keep time by the pins or whose breath counted the distance between two coughs. They will blame the coal if their throats feel bright in winter. They will open a window and congratulate themselves for modern habits. Somewhere between the soup and the roast, somebody will say that Paris knows how to be Paris, and the wall will accept the compliment like a servant who has decided not to answer. If you were in the room, you would nod, and it would cost you air. You think about names because a pattern doesn't have one, not outside the ledger. Vines number 7, parrot border 3B, Moorish arch, small repeat, numbers the owner can love and customers can order without risking intimacy. Your own name sits 4 floors away in a room that keeps the smell of you even when you leave. You imagine a small brass plate you will never get set low near the skirting board, where only the broom reads it, printed by the hands that burned. You picture a child reaching sticky fingers toward the parrot while a nurse says don't, and you hope the word means because rules, and not because symptom. Patterns misbehave by being successful. They outlive the wrists that taught them manners and introduced themselves in cities you'll never visit. Somewhere a postcard will brag about a dining room you'll never sit in, and the green will hold steady while memory wobbles. You inhale to object and exhale to let it pass. The breath costs either way. The walls they sit against are poison, and no one notices because poison is polite when it's handsome. It doesn't bruise doors, it doesn't shout, it doesn't stain a cuff at the supper table the way stew does. It simply enters the conversation as atmosphere and waits for lungs to be social. You can hate the chemistry and love the colour in the same breath, which is the oldest human problem wearing a fashionable coat. The pamphlets in the reading room argue about ventilation like it's a hobby. The editor says open windows, raise ceilings, cut drafts into discretion. You say lower the powder, cool the steam, teach inspectors to touch with ungloved hands, advice the parlour cannot hear. Beauty in a city like this is a ledger that balances somewhere else. The entries look small at first. 1 cough, 1 rash, 1 night of ribs learning to sing, and then the columns meet, and you understand that elegance is a roof held up by people who were asked not to stand too straight. Gallows humour helps until it doesn't. You wonder what's worse, being forgotten or being remembered as a caution. There is a dignity to vanishing cleanly, to letting your hours dissolve into someone else's dinner story, and never troubling the spoon. There is also a dignity to becoming the example whispered over a swatch book. Don't choose that one for the nursery love. The story behind it is unkind. Neither pays the rent. A museum a century from now might frame a roll and write a card in crisp type about the arsenical taste of 19th century chic, and visitors will admire the parrot while promising their lungs nothing. You could become a footnote under glass, or an invisible fingerprint under someone's chair rail. Which is better? The card with your dates wrong, or the private mercy of nobody knowing? You choose, as always, work. You fold your rag, you count the breaths home, you list the names of friends you can still afford to say aloud. Memory is just a ledger written in softer pencil. Your prints outlive you. This you know because paper is patient and walls are stubborn. A room will keep the pattern after the family moves out, ghosts of vines peeking from behind new plaster, parrots surviving as silhouettes where the sun taught the rest to fade. A demolition man will swing a hammer and pause because a bracket of lilies winks from the wound, and for half a minute history will taste like copper on his tongue. A landlord will pace fresh over old and believe he has improved the arithmetic. The plant will grow again through the seam. Decades later, someone will peel a corner and find your exact pressure, the way your wrist ended a press with a faint roll only printers notice. They'll call it charming and say the word authentic, which is a city trick for making decay spend like status. They won't know you, but your habit will be there, repeating with better stamina than breath. So you talk to the room even though it cannot listen. You tell it what you told us at the start, that we will move quickly through the truth and not pretend comfort is a gift, that this tour has splinters and you have carried them well. You rate the smell out of 10 and let the number stand even if it's a 9 you learn to call a 5. You make the last adjustments to the block on the mental bench, align the edge you cannot see anymore, and give the sheet a final press you can still feel. Then you lift, and the impression is there whether anyone thanks you or not. It sold parlours, it sickened hands, and it never quite left your throat. You learn to read rooms by the way voices sit in them. In the houses where money is tidy, conversation arrives in neat stacks and the laughter doesn't knock anything over. In those rooms, the green behaves like confidence, deepening in corners, warming in lamplight, smoothing out the frictions people bring from the street. You stand at the doorway with a roll balanced on your shoulder, and you can tell, before anyone signs, what the paper wants to do to the people. It will invite them to admire themselves in a shade that agrees with the story they tell at supper. On the mantel, a clock breathes in brass. On the sideboard, a decanter glows like an obedient ember. Along the skirting boards, the shadow line looks wealthy, even when it is only dust. Your part is delivery and measurement, then disappearance. And yet, as you step back down the stairs, you carry the room with you. The scent of coal disciplined by violets, the glass's thin chime, the way the parlour accepted green as if it had been born with it. Beauty signs the ledger. Your throat signs the receipt. When you walk home, you inventory the city's smaller theatres, kiosks where headlines lean into the wind, zinc counters scored by thousands of cups, a public urinal painted in a shade you recognise too quickly. A seamstress pins ribbon to a hat block and dusts it with a breath that isn't dust. A bookseller cuts twine with a flourish that would impress a fencing master. A policeman polishes his whistle like a moral. You're supposed to be healing, or at least not worsening, so you take the long way that avoids Rue Bleue and still the city finds you with its palette. A toy shop hangs hoops from a beam and each hoop trundles a green echo across the pavement when it swings. A cheesemonger's paper cuddle of goat rounds shines meadow through grease. The sky attempts grey. The shop fronts argue with leaves, parrots, arches. You try to keep your breath in the safe lane, shallow and sensible. It works until a bakery sighs its warm sweet into the street and the air lifts everything you learn to sift. On better afternoons, you manage the stairs to the reading room without bargaining, and the hush there is a kind you can afford. You take an atlas down just to remember seas that don't scald, and you rest a palm on the blue expanse, as if the pigment might leak peace through your skin. A travel book promises Naples light and air and 100 things you will not see. Another promises the Alps, which you will never climb without a pulley and a saint. You copy a line about pigments into your notebook. Copper, arsenic, acetic. Slowly, as if renaming an enemy could make him polite. Across the table, a clerk turns a page with careful fingers and coughs into a folded handkerchief the colour of peas. He tucks the square away like a letter from a relative he still loves. Newspapers chained to the rail declare that ventilation is virtue. A pamphlet offers diagrams for windows that never belong to anyone you know. You fold the pamphlet anyway and pocket it, proof that you still collect hope the way the shop collected rags. Sometimes you turn down Rue Bleue anyway, and let the memory lay its hand on your back. Through the fogged window you can see the old man teaching a boy the friction trick. Just enough heat in the wrist to keep the block alive, not enough to smear. You can see the green girl tilt her head when the pins catch, not rebuke, only habit. You can see the foreman counting sheets as if they were prayers. You stand there the way you stood the first hour of your first shift, an apprentice to other people's breathing, and you realise the bench has learned to continue without your name. That is what shops do. They keep moving so the city can pretend. You trace the ghost of glue in the air with your tongue. You count to 30 like a man practicing the alphabet of restraint, and you step away before your lungs start remembering the other half of the job. The bell rings, polite as always. The window keeps its secrets the way a mirror does in dim rooms. Nights lengthen, and with them the portion of thinking you do without sentences. You lie on your side, knees arguing with each other, and float a hand a few inches above the blanket just to feel the small weather there. If the air is still, the hand is yours. If it stirs, you can almost smell the loft again. Paste steam, old timber, a cat that has decided to be art. You make small trades with tomorrow. 4 errands if the cough is quiet, 2 if it clears its throat like a clerk. You promise your ribs courtesy and your breath wages, and both accept until the ledger opens. When sleep arrives, it brings you back to the bench, but the blocks are blank and you press them anyway because muscle remembers what hope forgets. The window in your room ticks as it cools. The neighbours stare, reports a boot. The river murmurs its iron lullaby to barges moored tight. You count all of it and count yourself. Patient, present, solvent in the only currency left. The thought you avoid becomes the thought you keep. One winter evening, a museum will hang a length from your bench, and people with quiet shoes will admire the repeat. They will call it exquisite, which is a lovely word that means done to the last detail, and someone will remark that the arsenic scare was overblown except in poor quarters without windows. A card will give the dates wrong by a decade, and no one will bleed from the error. A guide will say workshop and not shop, artisan and not you, and the room will purr with agreement. Still, something true will happen. A visitor will lean close and see the faint roll at the end of a press, the one your wrist learned from a woman who is resting in St. Cloud, and that visitor will feel their breath change, just for a beat. Not fear, not knowledge, only a flicker of weight where a wall usually weighs nothing. You will not be there to witness it, but the thought lays your shoulders back into their old square, and absurdly, you will feel tall again in the room that doesn't need your air. The city forgets in layers, and sometimes demolition remembers for it. You stand at a street where a wall has been peeled like bark, and there, inside, is the archive of dinners. Stripes under lilies, under parrots, under a vine that outlived 3 landlords and a very patient stove. A boy with a broom pauses, points with the arrogance of youth, and says the old paper looks better than the new, and for a moment the century agrees. A mason picks at paste that has become philosophy, muttering about men who papered over winters with borrowed birds. A scrap loosens, sighs, and falls, soft as an apology. You see how colours were chosen for rooms that smoked, and how green always wins the argument with soot. You think about wrists you knew and wrists you didn't, about breath that bought these repeating lilies, about the way a pattern is a promise that forgets to ask who signed. The wall becomes a ledger, debt beneath fashion, beneath taste, beneath the now. You watch until the foreman of stones waves you along. He has brick to set, and you have oxygen to spend elsewhere. At home, you inventory the body the way a shop inventories rags. 2 coughs before breakfast, one bright, one dull. A climb measured in landings, not rooms. A nap you pretend is study because the chair has a book's posture. You lay your palms flat on the table and take attendance. The burned small aureole, the half moons under the nails, the tremor that writes its own cursive when tea arrives. You stretch the fingers until they remember the reach between pins and block, then stop because nostalgia is a muscle that injures easily. A pigeon declares the roof a republic. The stove blinks, the cordial minds its own sweet talk in the cupboard. You practice breath like scales, slow and even, and mark the measure on a scrap the way we tallied sheets. 10 clean inhales, a rest, then 5 more in case pride is listening. When the cough interrupts, you fold the paper like an invoice and put it away. The lesson holds. Keep the accounting honest and don't let hope cook the numbers. Some nights you test a theory that names are charms. You say the chemistry, the copper, the vinegar, the arsenic that declares itself in a whisper, and afterward the breath feels no different, but the mind sits straighter, as if precision were a chair kept for guests. You say the people too. The woman in St. Cloud whose laugh was a small bell, the old man who tuned his cough to hymns and landed each beat on the forgiving syllables, the boy who learned the press like a language he would not get to speak long. You name the objects that made the shop a grammar, treadle, timpan, frisket, pins, and the room in your head obliges by laying them out in their old decent order. Then you speak the silence itself. The inspector's glove, hovering, the bucket that posed, the bell with its paid manners. Nothing magical happens. Still, the air around the bed behaves as if it understood courtesy, and that is something like relief. You add your own name last, quietly, to see whether the room keeps it. It does for the space of 3 heartbeats, and then hands it back uncreased so you can sleep. There were bright things, and you have earned the right to say them. Onion on a hot pan making the whole building agree. A winter sun that found the green and made it ring like glass. A lunch where the wine was too sweet and perfect anyway. The roof hatch's first cold breath after the loft. The way a clean print felt like truth arriving dressed for dinner. You remember the joke that deserved its laugh and got it. The cat that appointed itself proofreader and slept in the safest place. A letter carried to a woman who would heal because someone insisted she would. You remember a late delivery when the streets smelled of rain and coal and bakery, and for 10 steps Paris forgot to be cruel. You will not pretend these sweets cancel the ledger. They don't. They merely underline the line that reads, "We were here, we worked, we breathed, we noticed." That counts for more than 0, which is a victory on some days. And if memory asks for garnish, let it have a sprig of mint and a good seat by the window. The shop taught you to hear with your hands. The block told the palm when it had bitten too deep. The paper told the wrist when it was about to slide. The treadle told the calf when the day was a mile longer than the clock promised. Even the glue told the eyes when its skin needed breaking and patience was a vice. Even now, crossing a street, your body aligns to an invisible registration mark and you step exactly where two cobbles meet because accuracy is a prayer that never learned to stop. A friend asks whether you miss it and you answer in 2 columns. The craft, yes. The air, no. Skill is a form of love, and love misapplied still leaves fingerprints. You hold the ledger up to light and the watermark reads what it always read. Work mattered. The rest is footnote and weather. You do not forgive the cough, but you accept the grammar it taught. The patience of repeats, the humility of alignment, the mercy of starting again after a spoilage. Those are worth keeping even when the colour is not. If you've stayed this long, you understand why endings here arrive like shifts. Not with trumpets, but with someone wiping the bench and checking the door. We're near the bell, which is to say there will be a last page hung and a last pot skinned and forgiven. You can put your back against the wall and let the room take some of your weight. The city will go on pretending it invented taste, and we will go on remembering who manufactured it. When you sleep, the green will drift politely at the edge of the dark and you will breathe around it, the way a boat reads a current and keeps to deeper water. Tomorrow will want accuracy again, and you have kept enough of it to lend. I'll stack the rags, close the ledger, and leave the door on the latch so the night can breathe with you. If you could leave a note inside every roll, it would be small and unsentimental, tucked between turns like a pressed leaf. It would not accuse, it would advise. Air the room at dawn when the street is quiet and coal wagons haven't started their grammar. Boil vinegar in a bowl when guests are gone and let the window have an opinion. Dust with a damp cloth and throw the cloth away. Don't argue it into a second life. If a child sleeps there, move the cradle from the sun and from the stove, and if you can't, then count the breaths with a patience that counts you back. The note would be written in your neatest ledger hand, the one you used for tallies you hoped were true, and you would sign it not with your name but with a practice. Align, press, lift, air. Whoever found it would think it a packaging error, and keep it anyway because the paper felt important. They would not know the trick. The advice is for them, and the consolation is for you. You'd leave a second note on the inspector's desk, folded like a prayer, and pinned with a clean finger you didn't borrow. Touch the thing you praise, it would say, with skin you plan to keep. Test the window by opening it. Choose your numbers from lungs rather than ledgers, and when you study a bucket, ask it to be full, not merely present. Do not let best practices become a curtain. Let them be a door you open with a handkerchief you actually use. And if you admire a colour, wear it on your sleeve for 1 hour, then tell me about your evening. You would not send the note because theatre doesn't answer mail, but writing it would make the breath you're using feel less like surrender. You would tuck it under the cordial on your table, let it perfume the glass like intention, and then go on practicing health the way poor people do. With errands, vinegar, and the arithmetic of air, breath is currency, and you learn the exchange rate when the bell negotiated hours. Spend it like a miser, your ribs say. Spend it like a lover, your stubbornness replies, and the day splits the difference. Charging interest you pay at night. On good mornings you buy the river with 10 measured inhales, and sell it back in laughter to a dockhand who lifts a sack like a promise. On bad afternoons, 3 stairs barter for your pride and keep the change. You inventory what breath purchases, a paragraph in the reading room, a half cart of coal, a talk with the green girl where jokes are coins that still spend, and what it can't buy, a full hour without the taste of pennies, a future where wrists don't preface sentences, an inspector who owns a pocket of doubt. So you adjust the ledger, as you did at the bench. Small margins, tidy sums, the occasional miracle of even ink. Breathing becomes a craft. You get better at it than at arguing. If the city is an orchestra, Green plays first violin and never tires, sawing through winter and wallpaper, ribbons and pamphlets, until every street hums the same bright key. You are percussion, the treadle's foot, the rack's small click, the pot's soft skin breaking at the rim. Together it made a music polite enough to sell to polite rooms. You step back from the pit now and hear how loud it all was, even quiet. The rasp of paste on board, the sigh of paper leaving the block, the thin coughs that kept time without asking permission. You still tap a rhythm on your thigh in cues. The press's old iamb, and strangers think you are impatient when you're only remembering the measure that kept the room from tilting. The city doesn't slow for your silence. It simply folds your part into a bench where another heel will find the beat. You walk in time anyway, because that is how you learn to arrive. Sometimes you imagine a hidden signature, not in ink, but in pressure. Your wrist's faint roll at the end of a press. The way you favoured the right pin on cold mornings. The exact kindness your palm gave a misbehaving sheet. You picture a curious hand decades from now, peeling back layers in a house being remade, finding parrots under varnish and lilies behind a wardrobe, and noticing that one vine leans just so. A conservator will call it variation, a child will call it a secret, you will call it hello. In this fantasy nobody coughs. The room is airy, the bucket is honest, and the parrot's eye seems to watch like a friend who remembers the right version of you. You permit the daydream, then put it away where it belongs, with other true untruths that make the evening kind. Gallows humour helps until it doesn't. Kindness you give yourself without joke lingers longer. So here's the quiet bargain we can keep. You lie there with your hour, whichever one it is, and I'll keep the bench in mind. I'll set the block square, warm the glue with my palm, open the roof hatch for 6 breaths and close it before the heat escapes. I'll rate the smell out of 10 because that's our private sport, and then I'll rest the roller on cloth so it won't take a set. If you enjoy this kind of misery, subscribe to Noticing, because the algorithm out here runs on eyes and the stubborn refusal to look away. Tell me your wall colour in the morning, so I can have an opinion I didn't earn. And if it's green, especially if it's green, we'll forgive each other for liking it. You'll breathe, I'll listen, the room will take your side. When you sleep, I'll close the ledger and put the pencil behind my ear like I remembered something worth keeping.